JavaScript provides two different ways to set up a function: a function declaration or a function expression. And as was mentioned in the previous topic, each way is handled differently during the first phase of establishing the execution context. So first, what is the difference? What is a function declaration and what is a function expression? So first we have a function declaration, and a function declaration is probably the first way you learn to define a function in JavaScript. It starts with the function keyword, followed by the name of the function, and then we define what the function does, and that's always inside of curly braces. We may have parameters inside the parentheses. That's a function declaration. Now, a function expression is when a function is defined as a part of a larger expression. The simplest example is what we see here, where we are assigning the function to a variable. So this is the variable assignment operator, and then we have our function. And right now this is an anonymous function. There's no function name associated with it. We could add a name if we wanted to, similar to what is done up here. But usually a function expression is done without a name, and it's either assigned to a variable or it's used up as a part of that expression, for example, with a callback or something like that. Now, as far as the use of these two, a function declaration versus a function expression, nothing changes. We invoke them the same way. But there is a difference when it comes to hoisting. So let me add some additional code and we'll take a look at that. So first up here, I'm going to add two console log statements. The first console log statement is just going to log out the function, not invoke it. I didn't include parentheses after the function name. I just want to look at the function. So it's just going to log that out. The second console log statement will log out the results of the function. So I am going to invoke it. So I'll add the parentheses, and then I'm going to pass in a number, since that function is set up to receive a number. So there's the first console log statements. Let me enter two down here now. Same type of thing. I'm going to first log out the function itself, take a look at what it looks like, and then we'll log to the console the results. And we'll pass the same number in. We use a parentheses to invoke it, and pass that same number in, number 5. All right, let's go ahead and save this and take a look at the results. So I already have the HTML page running, and I'll just open the console. All right, so first we have a function printed here, that sum10 function. That was the first console log statement as we see here. Let me just reduce the size of this so we can take a look at it easier. So the first console log statement, it prints out the function. And then we have a console log statement. It gives us the results. 5 plus 10, 15. Then we come to these two console log statements. The first one's undefined. It's not printing out anything about the function. And then the second one, we get an error. Uncaught type error. Sum 100 is not a function. So what's going on here? Based upon our discussions of the execution context and hoisting, can you explain what's going on here? If you can, that's fantastic. But let's go ahead and talk through this. So in the first phase of setting up that execution context, it looks for any function keyword and it looks for any var keyword. A function keyword, the entire function is placed in memory. With a var keyword, there's a place in memory for the variable, but it is set to undefined. Remember, it does not receive its value until the second phase, until the execution phase. All right. So we have a function in memory and we have a variable, sum 100, that is currently undefined. So now when we do the console log statement of sum10, of course it prints out the function because that's already been set up in memory. So we have the whole thing and we're able to print it out. And we're able to invoke it as well. We pass in that 5, it returns a 15. We're able to log that out. Now, when we get to a function expression, it's not handled like a function declaration. Its variable has space set aside in memory, and it's set to undefined, but the function is not assigned to that variable until the execution, until it actually gets to this line. That's when the function is assigned. So the fact that we put these console log statements before, that gives us an undefined when we try to print out the function, and then we get an error when we try to invoke it, because right now it doesn't know that sum100 is a function. All it knows is it has an undefined value. That's all. And so we get an error when we try to invoke it. So big difference between function declaration and function expressions when it comes to hoisting. Now, we talked about declaring our functions before using them. And functions expression, as you can see, actually force this practice. If I want to do this correctly, these lines here must come after the function expression. They can't come before. So it forces that good practice of declaring functions before we use them. And that is one of the reasons why I mostly use function expressions. Yes, they require a bit more typing in this structure here, but I think it's worth it. I like the structure that they force with my code. So function declarations versus function expressions. Now, before we leave this topic, we need to address arrow functions. An arrow function is a function expression. Now, we will talk about arrow functions in more detail in a later section if those are very new to you. But if we look at an arrow function, we can see that its structure is most similar to a function expression. So let's say that I wanted to do a sum 1000 as an arrow function. Well, notice that our setup of the function is very similar to the function expression. We have a variable, then we have an assignment operator, and then we set up our function. Now, with an arrow function, if there are no parameters, we need parentheses. If there's only one parameter, we can get by with just putting that parameter there. If there's more than one parameter, then we need parentheses around the parameter as well. So right here, those parentheses are not required, but that is sometimes how you'll see an arrow function. Then we use the arrow, which is simply the equal sign and the greater than sign. We use that arrow to indicate this is a function, an arrow function. And then basically we set up the rest of our function. So that would be an arrow function. As you can see, it's most similar to a function expression. Not a lot of difference there. Just has some shortened syntax. But as we'll learn later in the course, that's not the only advantage of an arrow function. There are other advantages as well. So function declaration versus function expression. All right, let's move on to the next topic.